Hello, everyone. My name is Adrian, and I'm the Education and Community Liaison at the Nanaimo Brain Injury Society. I'd like to welcome Dr. Nancy Reeves here today for our November education session. This month, we're going to be doing a workshop on finding hope and healing during the holidays. With everything going on with COVID-19, we thought it would be great to invite Nancy Reeves back in to talk about some strategies for entering the holiday season. So welcome, Nancy.
Good to be here.
And I will just pass this along to you.
All right. So the holidays, we've already had some holidays. Diwali, we're coming up on solstice and Christmas and Hanukkah and a number of others. And so why? Well, because the weather is getting worse, it's getting darker. And in these difficult times, each year, people say, well, we need to celebrate, we need to bring light, and we need to bring joy, and we need to bring love. Now, that's particularly difficult when we're going through a pandemic and we're not allowed to be with each other as we have in the past. So, you know, what were you expecting when this whole pandemic started? I know for me, last March, I thought, well, by Christmas, COVID would be over. I'll be able to get back to life as it was before. Maybe you were expecting, as you were going through last December, in a year, there'll be more healing. Maybe my brain injury or other chronic condition will be better than it was. And that might have happened, but it may not have. Many people that I see have been saying, you know, really, can't do the physio I want, can't do the different programs I want. It's really slowed everything for me. Maybe you were expecting that there would be more time with family, friends, and the different programs that you're involved in. And now with this recent kind of semi-shutdown, lockdown, we're told we've got to stay away from people. So the time already for many people, December, can be difficult, with the pandemic even more so. So I think we need to have strategies, we need to have ways of dealing with this time to make it as good as we possibly can. The other issue that a lot of people have looking forward to December and the different holidays in it is, oh boy, going through the same old conflicts. You know, I don't get along with certain family members, or I've had bad experiences with the holiday time, and there can be concerns about that. Loneliness also can be a big issue, particularly now with not being able to see people in the way we were able to see them before. I know there are a number of my friends I just love to give a hug to, but not able to do that. Harder to connect, even though there are some ways to connect. There can be loss and grief during this time. This is a time during the holiday season, and particularly at New Year's, where we tend to look back and say, you know, things were better or things were worse, and we compare. And if we're going through a rough time for a number of different reasons, that makes it even more difficult. So what can we expect? Well, more restrictions, maybe lockdowns. Maybe we've got concerns about our own health, either COVID or something else. We keep hearing in the news that they're not able to do as many surgeries, as many procedures. It's a very different world than December 2019. But we do have a choice. We can focus on the negatives and move into more depression or anxiety or loneliness, or we can consciously work to take back the season. That takes effort and it takes time, but I truly believe it can be done because I've seen it over the 42 years that I've been a psychologist. This is this holiday time is difficult for many people. And yet I've seen people being able to make it as good as it can be. Now, some people are optimists. They look at a glass that has liquid in it as half full, and they say, okay, I'll count my blessings. Other people are pessimists. They look at the glass and they see it as half empty. Now, at times, both of those can be useful. I believe, though, that being a realist is the most helpful. When I look at the glass as a realist, I say it's half empty and half full at the same time. If I'm really thirsty, then that's a scarcity situation and I need to do something about it. I need to put more liquid in. If I'm quite full of liquid, I don't need any more, then I see it more optimistically. Well, it's abundance. I've got more than I need. So being a realist says, let's look at the situation, let's look at the positives, let's look at the negatives, and then see what we can do. Sometimes being positive about it is helpful. Sometimes realizing the negatives and dealing with those turns things around for us. So let's look at, kind of in a realistic way, at some strategies that we might be able to do to make this time easier for us. First of all, understanding helps. Knowing that we're likely to have what's called an anniversary reaction at this time of year. You may not know what you were doing last April 3rd, but you probably know what you were doing last December 25th. Anniversaries, whether we celebrate them or not, whether we feel good about them or not, are things we tend to remember. So it's very likely that as you go through this time, you'll be thinking back to last year and comparing it to now. And that can bring up grief, it can bring up sadness, maybe it can bring up loneliness. So sometimes being aware of that actually makes it easier. If it catches you off guard, that's often very hard for people. Also, it's okay to be yourself during this time. I know when I've been going through rough times, it's very frustrating when people walk by and say, hey, put on a smile, don't look so glum. Yeah, I don't need to pretend to be something I'm not. If this is a difficult time for you, it's okay to feel that it's difficult, but not to just stay there in that place, but see what can you do to make things better. One thing is to look at the meanings of this particular season. Looking at what has it meant to you in the past? Has it been good experiences or has it been negative ones? Then what meaning will be helpful to you this year? Sometimes people take one of the kind of traditional meanings of the season, love and light and hope and peace, and say, I'm going to choose that for a meaning to live into this year. One woman in particular some years ago said, you know, the last year's been really rough. I really need a sense of peace during this time. And so what she did was she had not been going to put up a tree or put out ornaments for Christmas because she felt that was too much. But when she started thinking of her meaning, she went and looked through some of her boxes and took out ornaments that really spoke to her of peace, spoke to her of that sense of calmness that she was needing. And she put those up. She bought a CD that was just peaceful music, and she played that instead of going with all the normal Christmas ones. And she said that that meaning helped her through this time and then helped her into the new year. And know that you can change this meaning next year. Some people get locked into certain traditions at this time and feel they can't change them, but it's okay to do that. It's okay as things change, and hopefully next year is going to be better. We get a vaccine if COVID is starting to run its course, then yeah, we can change the meaning. Important to have support systems. If you're feeling rough during this time, to share that, to tell people about your needs and your desires, what would be helpful for you at this time. It's helpful to use the grapevine that is part of every community. I bet in your family or in your friend circle, or your church or other place of worship, a sports group, there's at least one person who, if you give information to, spreads that everywhere. So one woman said, I really want people to reach out to me, but I feel embarrassed to ask them. This is a hard time for me. I said, who is in charge of the grapevine in your friend circle, in your family circle? And she said, oh yeah, Sue. Sue is really good at spreading information. I said, then she's probably going to be delighted if you give her that task. Just say, this is what our friend's need is. And she talked to me a couple of weeks later, and she says, well, yeah, not everybody is connected with me, but I'm getting a lot more calls. And people said, well, we didn't know what you needed, what you wanted, so we were kind of staying away to give you space. But when Sue told us that you actually want connection, we felt good about reaching out to you. Helping Hand strikes again. I have had lots of contact over the years with people who think they're being helpful, but they're not. One particular one was when I went to give a workshop at a senior's home. And as I was walking into the lounge where I was to give the talk, the director of nursing was kind of introducing me to residents as we walked along. And there was a woman, she looked like she was in her late 80s, and she was slowly wheeling herself down the hallway. The head nurse said, dear, are you going to the lounge? And she said, yes, I am. She says, okay, excuse me, Nancy. And she starts wheeling her down. She says, well, the woman said, but I can do this. I can do this. It just takes me longer. And the nurse said, yes, I know, dear, but I'm much quicker. I call that the helping hand strikes again, because she took over for that woman. She thought she was being helpful. In fact, when she got back to me, she said, see how much we care here. And I thought, no, that's not caring, to take over. So it can be helpful to look at your friends or your family or other people in your life, even professionals, and see, are they doing something that's really not helpful to you? And to see if you can let them know in a caring, loving way that you need more independence, or you need to be able to do certain things that they have taken over for you. So getting your support system to work for you as well as you can during this time can be useful. So symbols of healing and beliefs. Symbols can be really potent. Symbol can be a person, it can be an object, it can be a color, it can be something that represents something important to you. And the right symbol can provide comfort or support or guidance. I worked with a woman who had quite a severe brain injury. She had been in a taxi in Europe going to an airport, and a very large truck came around a corner in her lane, and she doesn't remember any of that. She was medevaced to Canada, and about a month later, she was realizing how severely damaged in mind and in body she was. I saw her about 9 months after she came back to Canada, and she was at the place where she could only be up for a couple of hours in the day. Lights bothered her, noise bothered her. Her thinking was much slowed. She had memory problems. And she said, I used to be, in fact, people called me Sunny. I used to be really positive. My job was to go from one country to another for my company and help people who were having difficulty, conflicts. I was a good mediator. She said, so the symbol I had for myself was the sun. I shone light on everybody. She says, now I'm an empty box. I'm no good for anything. Might as well just die. So we worked a lot to try to help her with that. But after about a month and a half, she said, I still feel like that empty box. I want to be the sun again, but I have about 2 hours a day where I can function. And what good is that? I said, that symbol is not you. And yet, if that's how you think of yourself, then there's nothing I can do to help you. You've got to find a symbol that's more realistic. Can't go back to the sun. She said, no, I know I can't. I said, but can you see that by thinking of yourself in such a negative way, that really restricts you? Symbols are very powerful. So she thought about it for a while, and finally she came back and she said, I found the right symbol. And she drew an empty box. I thought, uh-oh. And she drew the sun in the box. And she said, for 2 hours a day, I can be the sun. I have limits, very big limits. But once I realized that I could choose what I did with those 2 hours, I phoned up a couple of friends and said, I know you've been so supportive of me. Now it's time for me to give back to you. I can call you every week and give you an hour of my time to listen to what's happening in your life. And both friends were delighted, she said. And it really helped her self-esteem. It gave her a sense of meaning. She said, on one hand, it's just something very little, just 2 hours a week right now where I'm being helpful to others. She said, but from 0 to 2 hours is a big step for me, especially when I used to think of myself as worthless. So choosing a symbol that helps you, it might be wearing a particular color that makes you feel like life is worthwhile or that you're getting ahead with things. There are many symbols of this holiday season. So symbols can often be more powerful when they really reflect our deeply held beliefs or values. And I'm talking the way we view our life, the meanings we hold deeply. For some people, that is a particular religion or a particular belief system. For other people, they don't have that kind of codified, but they do have values that are really important. Joe said to me some years ago, I don't have values, I don't have beliefs. And I said, well, you've had a really rough time, the terrible car accident, it's left you very damaged. You've come a long way, but it's still hard. And financially, it's really difficult. He said, yeah, that's right. I said, so how many banks have you robbed lately? He says, well, I wouldn't rob a bank. I said, well, why not? You're having trouble financially. He says, but that's not right. I said, okay, that's a value. That's a belief. We live our values, we live our beliefs, and if we can clarify them, if we know what we're living for, that often makes difficult times easier. This is a time where it can be important to let ourselves grieve. Grieving is a holistic process of adjustment. We have emotions around grief, maybe sadness, maybe anger, sometimes a sense of relief, sometimes loneliness or worry. We have physical symptoms of grief. We may cry. We may feel physically tight or some deep sadness that kind of goes in waves through us. On a mental level, grief, unfortunately, although it's a normal healing process, can have some of the same symptoms as acquired brain injury. It can really impact our memory negatively, poor concentration, difficulty making decisions, and the way we look at our life, our beliefs, our spirituality, whatever that is. It can make us really wonder, like, why do bad things happen to good people? So it's on all those levels. Some people find it helpful to talk out their grief, to share it with others. And that style is called an intuitive style of grief, that it actually is a relief to let it through. Other people find they get more depressed if they talk about it. They find that if they do something, some project, that they actually feel better, but that talking doesn't help. That is a perfectly healthy style of grief called the instrumental style. It can be a problem, though, if people look at each other and say, well, my style's right and your style's wrong. And some families or couples have got into difficulty trying to change one member away from the pattern or the style of grief that works for them. So if we can be true to ourselves, then we get through much more easily. There's a difference, too, when we're experiencing loss between healing and cure. Cure means the loss is gone. If we're grieving a brain injury, that means the brain injury isn't there anymore. Healing is different. Healing means that our focus isn't 24/7 on our deficits, on the problems, on the challenges, that we are starting to come to terms with our reality, back to reality, our reality at this time. That doesn't mean giving up and saying, well, nothing good is ever going to happen in the future or nothing's going to change for the better. But it does mean saying, I'm going to see how I can live as well as possible given my current reality. And by doing that, that sets us up well for any future healing that might happen. But some people say to me, if I can't be cured, if the head injury stays, I can never have a good life. And that's really selling themselves short. So being able to focus on how am I healing? How am I feeling better about things, or being able to focus on other things? What is improving in my life, rather than just looking at what I want to be the end of this. Sometimes structuring our grief can be helpful as we go through this time, because we don't just grieve for the fact of a loss, say a brain injury, a death, a relationship breakup. We grieve for the meanings it holds and the implications it holds for us. So if we realize that this is, somebody will say, I can't work anymore. And that my whole self-esteem was tied up with doing my job well. And now I can't work and therefore I'm worthless. Well, they're going to have a really hard time healing, really hard time coming to terms with their loss. If they can look at that and say, I think I need to redefine my life. I need to find a different meaning because that one doesn't work anymore for me. That can be helpful. Energy is impacted by any chronic condition. And so many people who tell me they have an acquired brain injury will say, and I have such little energy, what's wrong? A friend of mine did her research at university on the difference between energy with someone with a acquired brain injury and without, and found that it's very different. Somebody without a brain injury can have a power nap if they're tired, can sit down and rest, maybe have a cup of tea, and energy starts to come back pretty quickly. Somebody with a brain injury who goes past their limits will find that it can take hours or even days to recover. So being able to realize that, and it's not strength of will, willpower, it's a fact that if I don't have as much energy, I've got to work with what I do have. If you look at our energy as a pie, some of us are quite high energy, some are low. If we have a brain injury, our circle, however big it was before, is now even lower. So we need to make very intelligent decisions, wise decisions about what to do with that energy. Because at first, in the first circle, after an accident, after a stroke, an aneurysm, most of our energy will be with grief, trying to come to terms with what's gone on, and trying and the survival functions that we need. And it may be that we're in hospital for some time and we only have a small slice of this pie and going into survival functions. We need help, maybe breathing, we need help to dress or to eat. We might not be able to walk. As time goes on, we get to the second circle where we're able to do everything we need to for survival. For some people, it's weeks. For some people, that could be months or a year or more. But we still have a lot of energy going into grief. And as time continues, we'll hopefully get to a place where we don't need as much energy going to grieving. And so we have some for enjoyment, for life enhancement. And there might come a time where we feel we're doing everything we can, we're managing our injury as well as possible. And so there are times when we feel pretty good. We have quite a bit of life enhancement, but there's always a little slice of grief because there's always some restrictions. And particularly at this time of year, during anniversary reactions, it might be that we go from circle 4 back to circle 3 or even to 2, as all of a sudden we're kind of hit in the face with, things are not the way we want them to be, or we're remembering our loss in a different way. So just to realize that this model kind of flows back and forth depending on what's going on. There are certain times of the year where difficulties might seem much worse. A teacher told me as September was coming up, since I've had the accident and the brain injury, not able to work. And yet this time I would be preparing for school. And I see all my friends who are teachers as well, who are preparing for school. And so I'm grieving much deeper than I was a month ago. And that's normal. If we can ride the waves of that and realize that, she said, now that I'm grieving, I don't have as much energy for looking after myself or, cooking meals or anything. That's where we need a support system. That's where we might need people to help us. Sometimes allowing grief some quality time. One man said to me that he was worried that Christmas Day was going to be pretty rough because his father had died the year before and had been a very great part of his family. And so he said, I just know that I won't be able to be there for my kids, for my wife, like I want to, because I'll be grieving for my dad. And I said, well, if you give grief some quality time, then it probably won't need to come into the rest of that time. So we talked about how to do that. And he came back after New Year's and he said, Christmas morning, I got up early. I went out to the cemetery. I spent some time talking to my dad and crying and remembering. And I felt as I drove back in the car that I was able to put my grief in a box and I could be there for the family. I could enjoy watching the kids open presents. I could be there and help with the dinner. So giving grief some time rather than just trying to push it away actually means that you're managing the grieving process. Looking at the rituals and traditions, we talked about this a little bit, but let them change to meet your needs at the time. If what you want is peace, go for that. If togetherness is important, finding ways via Zoom or phone calls to reach out to people. Asking, what's the goal of a tradition that I have? And is that still meeting my needs? Some people find that when they're going through rough times, helping others is useful for them as well as others. But realize that quality is more important than quantity. If you don't have a lot of energy, if you'd like to volunteer, if you want to connect with people, do it in smaller bits during this time, because you'll probably get tired more quickly since it's such an intense time. And it's most effective if it's a win-win situation. If you're helping someone, but you're feeling good about that it's not going past your limits, that like the woman who said she had a 2-hour window every day, she said, I'll do an hour with my friends. She wasn't kind of pushing past those limits, because people can tell if we're helping them either out of duty or if we're hurting ourselves by helping them, and they don't like that. Oops, I think we've come to the end. There was supposed to be another slide, but it didn't happen. I hope some of this has been helpful for you. I hope that this holiday season, because of what we've talked about or what maybe you're now thinking about, can work for you. And one good resource is the Nanaimo Brain Injury Society. The coffee mornings on Thursday, we're getting a lot of people coming out. It's all using the proper COVID protocols, and it's a good way to support. Mick is there to talk to people either in person or on the phone. If people are finding that they have issues coming up right now around their brain injury or just around this time, there's lots of good resources there. There's also good resources just generally online for people with acquired brain injury, and that could be a good support during this time where you can't get out as easily as you could before. So may this season be as good as it can be for you.
Thank you very much, Nancy, for giving us some insight onto how we can kind of navigate the holiday season with the pandemic happening. Like Nancy said, please feel free to reach out or visit our website, www.mbis.ca, for more information and resources about acquired brain injury. So we will see you in January for our next session, and have a good holiday season. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.